Hi, welcome back to the Unveiled Widow podcast. I am so glad that you are here for another episode. Thank you so much for stopping by. But hey, before we get started, hit that subscribe button down below. I want you to become part of the Unveiled Widow family. Don't just shack up with me. Come on, let's make our connection real. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Okay, so for those of you that watched me on the last episode, I gave you a little breakdown on me, just a little bit of kind of what was going on as I was stepping into this season of becoming a widow. And today we're going to go through part one of my late husband Nathaniel's cancer journey. So, originally, this journey started in 2016. um, my husband had been complaining about, feeling really tired. His energy had really started to change. And oddly enough, he was craving lettuce all the time, which was like the weirdest thing. And so I kind of teased him, like, hey, after being pregnant with three kids, craving lettuce is odd. That is so odd. But I remember my mom and I had been talking about other people that had had cancer. And of course, at this time, we did not know that my husband had cancer. But as I mentioned before, I do have a lot of cancer within my family, especially on my mother's side. And so we often kind of talk about people's cancer journeys or things of that nature. And one of the things that had kind of come up were people craving lettuce. And when my late spouse mentioned that about craving lettuce, I was like, whoa, that's kind of odd. And it kind of brought me back to that. Um, Along with the fact that he was always so tired. And come on, women, you know how men are. They don't like to go to the hospital or the doctor for that fact. But I really kept encouraging him, hey, you need to go to the doctor. Hey, you need to go to the doctor. And then he finally did. A couple months later, after he had been complaining, he finally went to the doctor. And during this time, we were in the process of purchasing a new home. So this was around about February of 2016. We were in the process. We had just started our escrow on a new home and things of that nature. And we were kind of going through that process. And my younger daughter and I, we were coming, it was a Saturday. We were one Saturday, amazingly, as I mentioned before, all of my kids played sports. Both of my girls played Division One soccer in college, as well as they played club soccer all the way through up until they went to college. And then our son was playing football and he was also playing basketball. So, needless to say, our weekends were pretty much never free. Um, Neither were vacations or holidays because it was like we were always at a sporting event with one of our kids. So this was like one weekend, a very rare weekend that we did not have to do any sports. So my daughter and I were driving. We were heading off to go somewhere, and my phone rang. And I answered the Bluetooth in my car, and it was the hospital from where my husband had gone and had finally gone to the doctor's office. And when he went, of course, they did like a regular wellness check and took blood work and things of that nature. So it was the doctor's office calling to say the result of his blood work. And they were very concerned, and they were like, we've been trying to contact your husband. We need you to get him to the hospital immediately. And they really didn't go into a whole lot of detail. It was just, hey, you need to take him to the closest urgent care, get him to the hospital immediately. Well, for us, the closest urgent care was in the city that we were living in, which was an hour away from where his actual doctor's office was at and an hour away from where he worked. Um, so, of course, I made a quick U-turn, immediately went back home, was trying to reach Nathaniel. We couldn't catch him. So we went all the way back to the house, and he was finally at the house. And I said, hey, the doctor said, I have to take you to emergency right now. They would not go into detail, but apparently it's pertaining to the results of your blood work. So he gets in the car with me. I take him to urgent care. And this is for anybody that's ever been to urgent care. You know that process is never quick and simple, right? It's like you check in, it's supposed to be an emergency, but we all know unless you're like life or death, bleeding from the body right then, usually your situation is not rushed. And so I was really surprised. We walked in, we checked in at the counter, and immediately they said, okay, take a seat. And they had someone immediately come out to us. That never happens, right? So right there, I knew, okay, something serious, because this doesn't usually happen. You know, my husband's not bleeding. He hasn't incurred a fatal wound, you know, whatever. And the fact that they're taking him this fast, that I knew something was up. So we get back into the emergency area. They take us back to one of the emergency little rooms or whatever. And the doctor comes in. The doctor comes in. This is not his normal doctor. Like I said, his regular doctor's office was an hour away. So we went to our local urgent care, but they already knew what was going on. Their information had been sent over to them. And so when we got there, we got the news that my husband's blood count was very low and they could not understand why. It was so low that they were amazed that he had not had a seizure or had not passed out. For those of you that are not aware, our bodies usually carry between, I believe it's 10 to 12 units of blood. My husband was between 4 and 6 units of blood within his body. So he had to have an emergency transfusion, blood transfusion. So needless to say, we're getting all this information all at this time. And again, we don't know, one, why he's lost all this blood. But of course, we were like, okay, well, this clearly would speak to why he was having fatigue, does not speak to why he was craving lettuce, but definitely would speak to why he was experiencing fatigue, because no low blood count, that means your iron's low, your iron affects your energy, all of that. So this was at least kind of starting to make sense as to why he was tired all the time. So we're in the hospital. They give him a blood transfusion. And this process took a little while. You know, when you have that many units of blood that's gone, that's a lot of transfusion that has to take place to get you back to a normal or a functioning, comfortable level where they're okay to release you. So we were there in the hospital for several hours because, of course, once he received the transfusion, then they wanted to monitor him after that to make sure he was okay, make sure his body wasn't rejecting in any way the transfusion he just had. So we were there for several hours. By the time we were getting ready to leave, we still had no understanding as to why he had lost all that blood. So, of course, the doctor there scheduled an immediate appointment with his primary care doctor and provided them, because once again, you know, they had taken blood work. They provided all that information to his primary care doctor. And this was, like I said, this was on a Saturday. So they scheduled his primary care appointment on Monday. Again, something that never occurs. You hardly ever are able to get into your primary care doctor that fast. And considering we were, once again, I was kind of like, okay, something's going on here. They are being too quick to make sure that we're getting treatment and being seen. So we go through that. Uh, Oddly enough, of course, because we've been in the hospital all that time, we hadn't eaten, so we were hungry. And it was pretty late. So by the time we got home, you know, we ate, went to bed. Of course, there were, for both of us, even though we slept okay, it's not like we slept great because we still had this question over our head as to why did he lose all this blood? Like what occurred? What's going on within his body as to why he was losing all this blood? So we go to his appointment on Monday with his primary care doctor. And basically, this is where life became really real. It was in that appointment that his primary care doctor informed us that he had cancer. Because, of course, he was not an oncology doctor, he could not give us stages or things of that nature. So, of course, we had to have a specialist appointment after that. Once again, that appointment got scheduled very quickly. And so I would say about 3 or 4 days later, something like that, we met with, well, the way the hospital that we were with, the way it's set up is they request that you're able to get care from a specialist. So we went to the specialist. I personally, anybody that knows me, they know I am very particular, especially when it comes to care and things of that nature, doctors. I am very, very particular. And the doctor that they originally gave us, the oncologist that they gave us, I was not really thrilled about. Um, so I decided, hey, it doesn't hurt anyway. Having been through and hearing my other family members with their experience with cancer, you always want to get at least another or a second or third opinion as to what's taking place. So I immediately began researching top oncologists within within our area or within the area, because since he worked an hour away and that's where his doctor was at, I figured it'd be best to get his care within that environment so that he's always close to his actual hospital, um, and close to his actual doctor. So I found a very wonderful oncologist who was a complete specialist in this field, which we found out at the time with our primary care doctor that he had cancer and that it was colon cancer. So um, I made sure that I found a specialist. The way that I am, um, I wanted my husband to have the best, and I searched for the best, and that's what I accomplished was finding one of the best doctors in the field within our area, which was in Southern California. Um, we met with him, and uh, what really kind of made all this so crazy is the day that we found out that he had cancer, we literally had just closed on our house. That was March of 2016. Um, so it was like you had good and bad happening at the same time. But we met with his oncologist doctor, and he started, immediately, because my family has we've had a lot of cancer in my family. Immediately I want to know what stage it is, because if I know what stage, then I kind of know where we're at in the process. And my husband, not, I mean, other than knowing about cancer, he wasn't real familiar with the stages and things of that nature. So I was kind of like educating him through the process. And in 2016, we found out that he was stage 3C, which basically that's the stage right before stage 4. So the only reason he was not considered stage 4 is it had not moved into like the lymph nodes. His cancer had not moved into his lymph nodes or in other other organs of his body, things of that nature. So it prevented him from being at that stage 4 category. But he was teetering the line, basically, between the end of stage 3 and potentially stage 4. So we immediately, in speaking with that oncologist, we started treatment immediately. What the doctor recommended was for him to have cancer, because he had colon cancer, and in the area that he had it, to be able to have surgery and have the tumors and the cancerous tumors and everything removed, with the hopes that with treatment on top of the surgery, that he would come through successfully. He was still young. At the time, my husband was 47, I believe it was, um, when we found out that he had cancer. So he's still very young. He still had tons of energy, tons of life. And our doctor was adamant that, hey, he can get through this as long as we can take this aggressively. So we had the surgery. And I'm just going to tell you, like I said, we are a family. We are a faith-based family. And we hold firmly to our trust and faith in God. And through this whole process, I will not try to throw anything on you if you don't believe in God or whatever. It is completely your choice as to where your faith is. But I'm telling you my journey and our journey as a family, that we believed and trusted in God through this whole process. And it is only because of Him that we got through it, and that we're continuing to get through it. But I'm just going to talk about, like I did in the first episode, about grace, being able to get through things with grace. Um, when my husband had surgery, and this is rare, and I've had various family members that have had to have surgery for cancer, and I don't think not one of them has told me that after their surgery they came home not having to take any meds. That is unheard of, that you're not having to take any pain meds. But God gave Nathaniel grace and favor during the first portion of his cancer. He had surgery, and he came out of surgery. They thought they got all of the cancer when they went in. When he came home about a week or so. He was in the hospital for about a week. He came home. He did not have to be on any painkillers. Hear me, no painkillers. They prescribed it, but he did not take anything because he was not in any pain. He didn't experience it. It was very mild, like to the point where, maybe like just like a bad headache or something like that was kind of the pain level. It wasn't horrendous like it can be. They had prescribed him like Vicodin with the expectation that he was going to have some harsh pain, and he did not. And I'm going to tell you, really, and we argued about this. Once again, I'm going to be transparent. So, as I told you, my kids, they all played sports. My girls were still playing soccer. My son was still playing basketball and football. And the day that we were coming home, my son had a football game. He played flag football. So, of course, it was Friday Night Lights. We were coming home Friday evening, and my late husband and I were in a debate and argument that he wanted to go see my son play. Mind you, he's getting out the hospital from surgery, right? He was adamant. He wants to go see my son play, and I was adamant he needed to go home and rest, right? Being a wife. But I gave in, and it wasn't as much for my husband as it was for my son. My son had gotten very accustomed to his dad being there at his games, and he had gone a week or so without his dad being able to be at the games, as well as him not seeing his dad because his dad was in the hospital an hour away. And, my kids and stuff were still in school, so it's not like they could go down there every day and go see their dad. So it was really for my son. Selfishly, it was for my son. And because I knew how my husband would operate, he would not be able to just go to the game, sit down, watch it calmly and quietly. No way. He was a sports dad. So, what did that mean? We get to the game, and because I know him, I knew he wasn't going to be able to just go and sit. We get to the game, and the first thing he does, he yells at my son and calls him over and tells him, "Hey, let's fix your flags," right? Complete dad moment. So I even took a picture of it. I might drop it down here in the video, of him fixing my son's flags. And this is post surgery. He had just had surgery that week. So the one thing that we did agree on is I told him he could not stay for the whole game. He could only stay for about 30 minutes. Usually my son's game was about an hour, so, or a little bit more, just depending. So we stayed for the 30 minutes. My son got to see his dad. His dad got to watch him play. And so again, this is March. This is in 2016. At this time, this was probably like April of 2016. April, May, somewhere around there. April, May of 2016. So as I mentioned, we went into aggressive treatment, which meant my husband started getting chemo treatment. His hospital was located, as I mentioned, his hospital was an hour away, closer to work. So what would happen, because we were both working at the time. I was working a full-time job out in the area that we lived in, and then he was working full-time an hour away. And so that meant that I could not be there. And I had not too long started this job, by the way. That meant that I could not be there when he was going through I couldn't be there for all of his treatments. This is where the support of family was amazing. The bulk of my family lived in the same city where my husband worked and where his doctors were at. And my parents were both retired. And I had two brothers. One brother actually lived in that city, and my other brother lived out in the city area where I lived. So they knew that I could not leave my new job. I just not too long started that job. I didn't have the time available to me. And so that meant I couldn't be there. So the support, oh gosh, of my family and my friends and my loved ones, they would step in. And so that Nathaniel was never at his treatments alone, they would come in and sit with him during his treatments when I couldn't be there. And that was such a blessing, not just for me, for a comfort level as a wife to know that somebody's there with him, that he's not doing this alone, but also for him. You know, it allowed him to have people to kind of talk to and kind of get his mind off of it while he's going through those treatments, because those treatments are brutal. And he had to do 6 months, I believe it was, worth of those treatments. And we got through that process. So I want to say, I think it was about November, somewhere around there was his last treatment, and he was given a clear bill of health. They showed no signs of cancer, anything. And mind you, when my husband was going through this treatment, that's why I say he handled it so gracefully. Unless you were close to us, you did not even know that my husband had cancer or that he was getting treatment. He would literally get up. He would leave our home about 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, drive an hour away, go to his treatment. Depending on what time it was scheduled, he would either go to work and then go to his treatment, or he would go to his treatment and then go to work. But he was always still working. And he didn't just work a little 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. No, this man was working between 8 to 10, sometimes 12 hours a day, while going through his cancer and going through his treatment. He handled it with such grace, such grace. And like I said, by about, I think it was like November, somewhere around there, October, November, we had gone through all his treatments. He was given a clean bill of health. He was doing great, or so we thought. And he was good. he was doing wonderful for that period of time. But we did not know what was going to lie ahead. Um, but what I want to say just in this episode here is, for those of you that are the widow or the widower or the individual that has experienced the loss, um, while you were going through it, I'm sure it was not easy while you were going through the process, especially if your spouse was like mine and was dealing with an illness that led to the loss. But what I truly loved was watching him, as hard as it was day in and day out, and as tired as he would be, God gave him so much favor and grace in being able to go through. And during that time, not only was, he an encouragement to, other people, the ones that knew, but he was an encouragement to me and my children that no matter what you're going through, no matter how hard the task may seem, if you stay committed and focused, that you can make it through it. And that's the one thing that I have kept with me through this whole process. No matter how hard it got, no matter how difficult, no matter how hurtful, no matter how painful, is that you can make it through it. And that's just what I'm going to remind you every episode that I'm on here. You can make it through it. Again, thank you for joining me on this podcast of The Unveiled Widow. Next episode, I will go into part 2, because obviously there was a part 2 of my late husband's cancer journey. And I will go into that with you in the next episode. But until then, please hit that subscribe button and stay on this ride with me as we go through my journey as a widow, and dealing with the process of being a widow over these last few years. Remember, you are not alone. You have people that love you. You have support. And if you don't have any other support than this Unveiled Widow podcast, know that I'm here for you. Hey, drop something in the comments if you have a question. If you just want to talk, drop it in the comments. I am going to respond. I promise you. Also, go over to my website, theunveiledwidow.com, okay? theunveiledwidow.com. You can also reach out to me there. You'll be able to email me at info@unveiledwidow.com. Again, info@unveiledwidow.com. If you want to share your story with me, if you want to talk to me, if you just want to express what this video has meant to you and my videos, please drop me a line. I will definitely respond to you, or go ahead and respond in the comments to this video. But until next week, again, I'll be dropping a brand new video next week, and we're going to go into part 2 of my husband's cancer journey. I look forward to seeing you next week on the Unveiled Widow podcast. I am going to be looking for you. Thank you for joining me on the Unveiled.